The King's Choice. You Only See My Beauty, but You Don't Know My Story. A memoir by Stacey Amawoye, as told to Teresa Laryea. Chapter 11. The Fulfilling of Purpose. But Jesus looked at them and said to them, With men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. Matthew 19:26. One day, a friend of mine who was a beauty queen invited me to have lunch with her at a restaurant near the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, known as the Unsettling. As we ate, 3 men walked over to our table. She excused herself and went a little distance away to talk to them. The next day, she called me on the phone and spoke to me about a project that she was involved with in Nigeria which had to do with orphans. She had to make a trip to Nigeria and asked me to accompany her. She said it was an all-expenses-paid trip, and all I needed to do was to show up. Since charity is my heartbeat, I did not hesitate and agreed to accompany her. We met at the airport, boarded our flight, and after an uneventful trip, we arrived safely in Nigeria. A car was waiting to pick us up at the airport, and we were whisked off to Ogba, which is in the eastern part of Nigeria in River State. I took in the sights and admired the beauty of the city as the driver whisked us off to a big house which was privy to some fantastic views of the sunset. After taking in all the luxurious details of our surroundings, I asked my friend whether we were in the right place. She smiled and reassured me that this was our destination. For some reason, I felt unsettled, but I tried to calm myself down. I was surprised to see only 3 people in the sprawling mansion: an elderly woman, a house help, and the owner of the house, who was one of the gentlemen that had previously met us at the restaurant in Ghana. I was a bit confused because we had come purposefully to do some charity work, so I wondered what we were doing in the house, but I kept my queries to myself. After we had exchanged a few pleasantries with our hosts, my friend and I were escorted to our separate rooms. Later on in the day, the owner of the house took us to one of the finest restaurants in Nigeria. I ate heartily as the food was delicious. Spicy snails with rice, rich palaver sauce with a gushy stew, and iba were all lined up before us, sending off a mouth-watering aroma. My previous confusion and trepidation seemed to evaporate with each delectable bite. We ended up spending a long week in Nigeria. Throughout our stay, each time we met our host, he called me Ishi. I later found out that this means a beautiful horse. I was not sure where all this was going, but I did not have long to find out. One evening, the man asked us to dress up for a night out. During our outing, I realized that he was flirting with me, often smiling and being extra attentive to me. When we got back to the house, the man escorted me to a quiet place and proposed to me. To say that I was caught off guard would be an understatement. Was it even possible for a person to offer marriage to someone he had just met? I wasted no time in telling him that I barely knew him and could not possibly accept his proposal. Being a gentleman, he told me that he would be patient and would give me time to get to know him a little better. From that evening until the day we returned to Ghana, I was treated like a queen by my suitor and his family, which included his mother and sisters. They treated me as though I was one of them and made me feel very much at home. It was apparent he had said something about me to his family, but I was still curious to find out about what he had told them. So I asked my friend. She told me that according to the man, it had been love at first sight, that from the minute he laid eyes on me, he told her that I was the woman of his dreams. I was a bit skeptical about that, but I decided to wait and see how things would unfold. All too soon, we completed the project and our trip was over. A day before our departure, I overheard my suitor in an argument with his mother. Throughout our stay, I had never heard anything like that, so I was curious to know what had precipitated the shouting match. It was not until a few months after we had returned to Ghana that my questions were answered. It turns out that my friend who invited me to Nigeria became envious of me upon seeing how much the man liked and pampered me. So she went behind my back and told his mother some strange things about me, which generated the heated argument between him and his mother. I could not believe how duplicitous people could be. However, upon our departure, I was given lots of luxurious textiles and lace materials from the man's family, which I began to wear in Ghana. Each time I had a piece made into a dress or wore it, I received lots of compliments. Predictably, that inspired me with another business idea, and with that, I went into selling of Nigerian lace. It turned out to be a very profitable venture, and though it caused me to make many trips to Nigeria, I never got back in touch with the man. As I went about traveling, I had a significant amount of clothes piled up which I no longer needed, so I decided to distribute them to people I thought would appreciate them. I was gratified to see how grateful they were for those clothes. Their smiles and excitement proved how much they valued the garments. Some of the ladies were so excited that they folded the clothes and used them as pillows to be sure that they were not stolen. After observing this, I told myself that if my used garments could make such an impact on others, I had to do more. So I went a bit further and bought some second-hand clothes at the Cantonmento market. I added them to my stash of garments and prepared to give them out to charity. I also went boldly from door to door asking people to donate their old clothes for the less privileged. My efforts paid off and I managed to gather a lot, which enabled me to make my very first donation to an orphanage in Darkuman, a suburb of Accra. It was a huge donation which the children received with great joy. There were migrant children from all over West Africa. Handing the clothes out to them proved to be a tricky business. The children were so eager to get their clothes that they crowded and jostled us, shouting and laughing. I felt delirious with joy and amazement as I thoroughly enjoyed the warm hugs and the feeling of belonging. I could not get enough of those precious children, so I spent the entire day with them. I was so hooked on the children's love that from then on, I did more investigations to find more orphanages around the country that I could give to. I started to pursue them, visiting the children's homes even when I had nothing to give, hoping to be of help to them in any way I could. Sometimes I would encourage the children or just be a listening ear to them. They were glad to share their stories with me, some of them so familiar to mine. I went back into the business of selling wigs and cosmetics just to make more money to support my philanthropic efforts. Unfortunately, some of the homes turned me away, saying that I was just too young to make any meaningful contribution to their establishment. But I was unstoppable and driven, so I persevered until I won them over with the sheer volume of my donations. My second significant donation was to the Cocoa Clinic in Accra. There were a lot of disabled children there who had come from all over the country to learn trades in shoemaking, bag making, and sewing. Most of them, though they were crippled in their limbs, were extremely active in their minds. They were full of dreams and visions. Some of them were talented singers but had no one to appreciate their potential or to groom them. Some of the little girls said they wanted to be princesses, while some of the boys said that they wanted to become presidents. Some of them were so handicapped that they could barely feed themselves. As I watched them struggle to lift their spoons to their mouths, I felt like weeping. I felt a flood of gratitude flow through me as I thanked God for blessing me with good health in spite of all that I had suffered as a child. The caretaker-to-child ratio was low, and the children who were frustrated took it out on the caretakers. They became tough to handle, especially with their handicaps. The home was understaffed and they needed all the help they could get. I asked them how I could be of help to them after I donated some money to them. One day I had an epiphany. I got some of my apprentices to volunteer to go and teach some of the children hairdressing. So for 3 months, they labored with the children and poured out to them knowledge and skills. This produced amazing results and brought great joy to them. I continued my trek around the children's homes, and the more I visited them, the more I desired to do more for them. Within a short amount of time, I was able to make several donations to places like Labadee Street Children's Outreach in Accra, the Edwin Nays Rehabilitation Center in Kumasi, the Accra Psychiatric Hospital, the New Horizons Special School, Children with Autism in Accra, and the Lighthouse Children's Home in Cape Coast. One of the most critical aspects of operating any form of charity is accountability. My donors wanted to see photographs and videos of the work I was doing, to let them see the impact that their donations were making in the lives of the children. However, some of these homes were so hostile to us that they banned us from recording or taking pictures on their premises. It is incomprehensible how people you are trying to help will erect obstacles to make it more difficult for you to help them. Some of the homes were suspicious of us trying to use them to make a name for ourselves. Some of them even dismissed us from their premises right after we had made our donations. I was tempted to become bitter and discouraged, but I persevered, attributing their poor behavior to ignorance. With time, I was inspired to introduce free health screenings to our ministry to the poor. Through this, I was able to touch over 500 lives, which included market women who had no idea they were walking around like ticking time bombs. Some of them had chronic high blood pressure, yet had no idea. Through the screenings, many of them became more conscious of their health. With those who needed immediate medical attention, they were referred to nearby hospitals and clinics. These free screenings were of great benefit to the people of Fadama, the Makola Market, the Darkaman Market, the Nyamakai Market, the Avino, the Mercy Day, and the Lighthouse Orphanages in Cape Coast. You can give without loving, but you cannot love without giving. Amy Carmichael. I did the charity work alongside my hairdressing business and had even more apprentices coming in from all over the country to be trained. At a certain point, I realized that I needed to upgrade my knowledge and skills, so I enrolled in school at the Second Image International Institute to acquire a certificate in beauty therapy. I then continued to study at the Allure College, where I obtained a license as a beauty specialist. With these two certificates, I officially set up a school. I named it the Anaya Education Complex, which I built above the salon. Since this school was for the needy, it differed from other for-profit institutions. I provided everything that a needy student would possibly require to enable them to fulfill their educational pursuits within the school. The expansion also included a hostel where I housed the students that came from afar. I also provided them with food and clothing. The school trained both young men and women in cosmetology. They graduated after 3 months of intense training with certificates in hand. I waived the tuition and registration fees, so the only requirement for enrollment was the readiness to learn. By the grace of God, since its inception until now, the school has trained not less than 200 people who have established themselves in the beauty industry both within and outside Ghana. I was thrilled when some of them named their children after me. It was the icing on the cake. It touched me to know that my legacy would live on in the lives of some precious children. The school became like a family to the students. When a new student arrived, we immediately initiated them into the fold by giving them a nickname. Many of the students who came in from the rural areas came in with little or no knowledge of personal hygiene, so I had to personally teach some of them how to clean themselves properly. Many of them did not even know how to launder their clothes, so they had to be taught. Being athletic, I felt it was vital for them to learn how to stay fit. So on days when we had a light workload, I would take them out to a park and we would have some athletic competitions. We competed in both indoor and outdoor games, as well as tournaments. The winners received cash prizes. The evenings were like parties. We gathered around, cooked, and ate together. After dinner, we had what I called confession sessions, where students were allowed to confess things they had done behind my back. They were also encouraged to ask questions and receive counsel regarding anything that concerned them. We had a very open and informal culture in the school. We encouraged teamwork and got the work done. Most of the students were eager to please and impress me, so they gave it their all. The graduation ceremonies were my favorite part of the whole process. The only time the students had to provide any funding was during the graduation ceremony. I pegged the amount to be raised by each student to the GHC 500. They were allowed to collect donations from their friends, families, churches, and loved ones to enable them to set up their startup salons. I recorded how much each person was able to raise, and at the end of the graduation ceremony, I presented it back to them. With each graduation came a sense of fulfillment that words cannot express. It established this knowledge in my heart that with God, any vision can come to fruition. I built that school from nothing and am still amazed that I actually managed to pull it off. Every child needs a champion. Hillary Rodham Clinton.